Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Does anyone have any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I'll proceed with the adoption of the previous minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Glenn and Mary. Moved by Glenn, seconded by Mary, that the minutes circulated or dated May 27th, 2025 of the Short-Term Rental Committee be adopted as circulated. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor with the motion? Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to item 4.1, the Central Elgin short-term rental discussion. We put it on the agenda at Mary's request. Evan had put it on. He is not here tonight. Does anyone have any comments on that link that he sent, the video? Mary, go ahead.
It's been a little while since I watched the video of that council meeting, but I guess one of the things that I was interested in was who was the company that Elgin used to find the numbers of the listings, and I think I'd asked that at last meeting. I don't know if we found that out. Um, um, and I don't know what else Anyway, I thought it was really interesting, the issues that they were addressing. The what a- I sort of my notes were the enforcement was implemented through notice of violation versus demerit system, and they noted that that would give staff some discretion to deal with issues, and that made sense to me. Let's see, and they were talking about a tiered system, and I noticed that it's that's mentioned in our notes for this week, but that not all short-term rentals have the same impact, and don't overburden the casual host, and that there's a difference between mega business and family-run businesses in short-term rentals, and I think that's really an important thing to recognize in this community. And that in Elgin, most disruptions or violations came from larger operators. Um, and that they said that they talked about fees being revenue neutral, and I guess we're talking about that as well, right? Yeah. Anyway, those are my comments.
Okay, any other comments? No, I think that it was a good clip. It's just, I guess for information, we'll accept it for information and move on to the next item agenda. Thank you for your comments, Mary. Item 4.2, the draft application for short-term rental licensing. We do have a draft application here, and I would like some comments, and I'm going to look to the TV screen first, just prepared for Mike's hand, unless Sean wants to put his up. Mike, do you have some comments on that?
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. I think it captures a lot of the items that we had discussed. A few open items, and again, I think that's noted further on in the agenda, whether the liability insurance be capped at 2 million or 5 million. So I guess we can come back to that later. The other question I had, based on my notes, paragraph I, which is the supporting documentation. We're asking for the copy of the renter's code of conduct that particular STR owner or applicant has in place. In my notes, I also had a comment that we were also going to ask for the information package for the renter that is provided by the licensee. So maybe that was just my note and we didn't agree to that. I did have that in my notes from last time.
I'm not sure what we agreed on, but I think it's a good idea. Do we have any comments on the information package from the rest of the crew here? Mary?
Well, being a short-term rental operator myself, our package is stuck up on the bulletin board. It's not a formal, I guess it is formal because those are the expectations that we have. And they're discussed with every tenant. And so I guess, so we would be asking renters to formalize that in a different way. So maybe it would be helpful to have a template that might help.
Turn
Renters.
to whichever one has their finger on first.
Yeah, this-
I think we agreed last time we met, that we would provide a draft template and then people can take it and go from, because a lot of people are say, how do we do this? And then
Then I guess,
Okay.
Mark, the question is, once they create that, do we want to see that as a submission as part of their application? What they ultimately come up with?
Go ahead, Florence.
I think that was the understanding. I think there were two pieces. One was the renter's code of conduct, but then also what's the information that you're going to be giving your renters or showing your renters or expecting them to look at. So yes, I think that was the intention there. So we'll make sure that happens.
Okay, thank
So
you.
that's
Any
just
further comments?
Just a question on paragraph L. I'm just a little bit confused as the statement there, the way it reads.
Okay, I'm just going to give everybody a time to find paragraph L, and then you can tell me which part you're confusing, every line or a specific line or?
Well, no, sorry, just the very opening preamble. Must be completed by the applicant, and if there is an owner, comma, by the owner and applicant. And
So perhaps I should read it, and if the applicant is different than the owner?
yeah,
Than the
again,
owner and applicant?
from my notes, must be completed by the applicant, period. If the applicant is not the owner, comma, by the owner and applicant.
Yeah, I like that. Florence, you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Madam Chair, that's all I have.
okay, thank you, Mike. Any other comments? No, okay, great job, staff, on that one. Let's move on to item 4.3, the definitions. There was quite a lot of wordsmithing opportunities last time. I think I saw Florence taking copious notes, and here's the second draft. Do we have any comments on the second draft of these definitions? Sean?
Sorry, I have a couple of definitions that I think it's worth considering adding. In the application, it talks about advertising, that you're not supposed to advertise prior to having a license. So I wonder if we should define what an advertising is, like if it's an active listing on online hosts. And then I wondered about the occupancy, if there's any restrictions on outside gatherings and if that's needs to be defined further.
Good points, both of them. This is how slow my mind is working. Does anyone else have a quicker comment to make? Are you whispering to me or to yourself? I can't tell.
My brain is working at the same pace. So outside gatherings, I'm thinking about if you've invited people over for a campfire and you're having dinner outside and they're not staying overnight, but they're just coming for the day. My first thought was, where are they going to the washroom? Right? Like, are they part of the deal? Are they, are they part of, are they, now I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, sorry.
You're asking if they're using the toilet or the lake?
Well, also the noise issues don't happen from inside the cottage. They happen on the outside of the cottage. So that's just food for thought. That's what came to my mind.
Okay, let's think about that for a minute, and let's go to the easier one first, which is the advertising. I think that's a valid point from my point of view. How specific do we need to get there, Sean?
I have some suggested wording. If I can read it. So I wrote it down as active listing, publicly accessible advertisement, online or otherwise, offering a property or portion thereof for short-term rental, regardless of whether a booking has occurred or not.
Excellent, I think. Florence?
We can put that down and then the next time. So I still plan on bringing the definitions forward and we can review it again the next time. Okay.
So the outside occupancy, do we want to think about that for a minute? I'm trying to think, it's just not working. Do we have time to parking lot that and bring it back, or what are we thoughts?
I guess I'm not so worried so much about the definition of what it is. I'm wondering, is this something the committee wants to entertain as a possibility, or are we limiting the occupancy for the duration of the entire rental? Or because that will kind of give us an idea of how to word it in the regulation. Looks like Anita has her hand.
Yeah, I saw Anita's hand up. I'm like, yeah. I'm the chair though. So Anita, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. So, I've brought occupancy up a number of times, but Florence raises a good point about outside gatherings. In my personal opinion, I'm not certain that an outside gathering constitutes part of occupancy. Occupancy to me is, people that are occupying the inside part of the short-term rental, in specifically overnight. But in terms of, I see where Florence is going about how often are people using the facilities for washroom. I can see where that can be a problem septic wise, but it's kind of hard to sort of regulate how many times somebody can use the washroom if they're outside at a campfire. I guess that's what it kind of comes down to in my mind, but occupancy for sure in my mind means who's sleeping on a bed and a couch and a futon and on the floor and a sleeping bag inside, taking up space. That seems to me about occupant. Outside, that's where most of the noise does occur, but hopefully you capture that in the noise definition. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does to me. I have comments before let other people comment first because my brain is starting to work. Mark?
No, I would agree. Occupancy should be for the building, because let's say Aunt Betty rents her cottage out, and I rented it from Aunt Betty, and there's only 4 of us, but I decided to celebrate my 30th birthday party and invite a few guests over, but they're just going to sit outside and have a campfire with me outside, and so that should be classified of occupancy. They're just there to wish me happy birthday and sing happy birthday to me around the fire, and then they're going to go home.
Yeah, Florence?
So we did define guests.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would assume that this would be kind of one step further to that.
Yeah, my inclination, which isn't necessarily a fully formed thought, certainly with no depth to it, but my inclination would be to say that would be a parking lot item for me. And if the noise bylaws and that do not capture the problem that we have with big outside gatherings, then we make it a little bit like we review this in a year and say, okay, what do we need to add and subtract? It's maybe a little draconian to start with it, I think. I do like that word. Okay, yes, Anita.
I wondered if there's a caveat that you can put under occupancy, that an occupant is always a guest, but a guest is not always an occupant.
And I'm just trying to follow Anita. What would be the point of that statement? And I'm
Well,
not meaning to be
because
dismissive. I'm just not focusing
No,
there.
I know, I understand what you're saying, Jennifer. So, an occupant is always going to be a guest inside, but a guest sitting around the campfire that's not taking up bed space inside the short-term rental, is just that, a guest, not an overnight guest, not a 24-hour guest, but a guest for less than 12 hours. I shouldn't even say that because they could still be sleeping over in 12 hours, but
Mm-hmm. Do you want, I'm gonna have Florence go and then you, Mike.
So in the definitions, guest is an individual who is not a renter, but temporarily visiting the short-term rental premises at the invitation of a renter. Guests are permitted to stay overnight, provided the maximum occupancy is not exceeded. So that's kind of where we landed on the guest definition.
Okay, Mike, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Florence was just saying, because we also deal with occupancy under the general requirements, which I don't think is on the agenda for this evening, but I thought we pretty much thrashed through all of that last meeting. And there we defined occupancy, or occupancy shall comply with the following regulations. And that is the maximum occupancy shall not exceed, 2 individuals per bedroom plus a total of 2 persons to a maximum of 10 per short-term rental. So that ties it back into occupancy without factoring in the all of the guests that are attending Mark's birthday celebration.
Yes.
Okay, so I like the way this is going and this may already be answered, but it made me think in these definitions and all that, does it stop people from putting tents up and exceeding the occupancy? Because we do have that one who, actually advertises, come put your tent up here, and then there's a lot of tents. Like, is that covered somewhere in our stuff?
Sean has his hand up, I believe. You want to talk about that?
We'll go Sean then Florence.
Yep. So the definition as it's written here currently, it says a combination of renters and their guests who are permitted to be present on the short-term rental property at any time during the rental period. So it just got me thinking, like if you had a family of 5 and the occupancy was 6 and your sister and brother-in-law and Mark and his birthday party came over for a refreshment, is there a violation there, and is that reasonable? So it just got me thinking a little bit. So the way that the current definition of occupancy, maybe it just needs to be tweaked to distinguish, are they inside or they outside? Is it maybe just a little more thought?
Florence, I can see you thinking, but Mark moved his finger over there. So Mark?
Again, the guest does say provide the maximum occupancy does not be exceeded. So if all those people show up, they can't exceed that maximum occupancy. I don't know if I answered my question.
You think you did? Florence?
I feel like we're trying to find a balance between allowing people to have people over to hang out for a couple hours and like that balance. And then also between, things getting past 9 p.m., getting past rowdy time, getting past. I feel like there's a definition somewhere in there. I feel like this is a little parking lot piece. I'd be happy to spend some time and kind of get some wording together to kind of balance out that, because I'm picking up what you're putting down, but let maybe leave it with me, and then we can see if we can figure something out. Anita's got her.
Okay, Anita?
can we, would it seem reasonable if we added into the guest definition that guests are permitted no later than 11 p.m., which I think is where the noise bylaw comes in? Or are we, the other thing I'm thinking too, are we overthinking this? Similar to what Florence is saying, like the definition of guest is right there. They're welcome to stay as long as they don't go over the occupancy, as Mark said. Are we just overthinking this too much? And is this something that we've defined as best as we can, and after a year, the committee comes back to it and we look at, some of the issues that arose, maybe this will be one of them, and that's when we tweak it, when we find out where the gaps are.
I agree, Anita. I think we're overthinking this.
Yeah, okay, so we'll parking lot this and
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think, again, we have to remember what's the purpose of this. It's to make sure that, if there's repeat issues, that we have the tools that we need in order to enforce. But the noise bylaw covers the noise anyhow. And I mean, if there's a complaint happening regularly, consistently, then we've got an issue and then we can revisit. So I agree.
Okay. Then let's move on to item 4.4. Oh, sorry, Mary?
I just want to say, I think that we are overthinking it, but we don't, I think if we're going to make this palatable for cottage owners, we want to, we don't want to legislate behavior, right?
Mhm.
For 99 or 98% of people who rent their cottages, there aren't any issues. And so, I think you gotta ease in gently
Yeah.
and, or people are going to be so resistant. Anyway, my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to item 4.4, outside standing items for consideration. Maybe just go through them one at a time. Correct? Insurance level 2 or 5 million. What are our thoughts? Oh, Mike, is your hand still up or up again? It's hard to tell.
No, actually, I was trying to get your attention before we moved away from
Oh,
definitions.
sorry,
Just
we can go back.
Sorry, just a very quick question. In the definition of bedroom, which I think was an addition that was incorporated into the definitions, it makes reference to as described by the building code. Since building code is capitalized, do we need to be inserting a definition so that it's consistent with whatever the current language is for the formal building code act or whatever it's called?
Yeah, good point, Florence.
I think what I'll do, instead of adding another definition in, I might just throw like the actual building code and then the legislative
Yep, that's what I was going at. Yep.
acronyms at the back, and then or as amended or as changed or whatever. So just to formalize the document of what it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We okay to move on? Or are we on 4.3 or 4.4? Because we went back to 4.3. Okay, we're still on 4.3. Yep.
Okay, I just, stupid thing, but just in dwelling means a place of residence, and so tent trailer but we don't mention a boat. And I know that boats on page 18 with the prohibitions, but a boat isn't a dwelling, right? So maybe that we should add that.
Hey, good point. Any others before I hastily move along? No. Okay, now we're gonna go to 4.4, outstanding items. And the first outstanding item was the insurance level. Should it be 2 or 5 million? We've had time to think. Has anyone thought? Anyone have any thoughts? Mark does.
I wonder whether 5 million's hard to get, is it? I know me at home, I don't think I have anything 5 million, but I don't know. I'm not an insurance person either, so I don't know.
Okay, first of all, if you're gonna have all those birthday parties, you should look into it. And Glenn, go ahead.
I would like to defer to our insurance guru, Mr. Nicholas, for a comment.
Okay. Yep, Mike?
Yeah, 5 million is certainly available. Typically would have to be structured on a personal insurance policy by buying $2 million of primary insurance and then a $3 million umbrella. My memory fails me as far as what some of the other bylaws that we looked at in the past, in our early stages, whether their insurance requirements were 2 or 5. Florence, your memory is probably better than mine.
Okay, Florence?
There's a lot in my memory, but not that one. My thought just went to, while I was reviewing, and we'll get to this kind of topic a little bit later, but while I was reviewing, there was a difference between a light rental and like a commercial style rental. So if you're, if you rent so many days a year, then you would be you know, in a different bracket for fees as you would be for somebody who rents more than
Mm.
someone
Mhm.
in a calendar year. And then my thought was, you know, does the person who rents less, who has less, you know, do they get the 2 million, and then the one who has the more, do they have the 5, depending on, like, I'm just wondering if the scope of the rental, if that makes a difference.
Well, let's defer to our insurance guru, Mike.
I think if you're dealing with somebody that is a casual renter, more than likely, it definitely will be an extension off of their personal insurance policy. And I would suggest that it would be unusual. Well, it would be unusual that most people would have more than $2 million on their personal property insurance. And as far as somebody that treats it more as a business, you know, that they don't use the cottage themselves, but it is, you know, it is a business opportunity for them. Chances are for them, 5 million is not an unreasonable request. And more than likely, if they are operating that as a formal business, then chances are they have a commercial liability policy as opposed to a personal liability program. And then 5 million would be appropriate.
So how do we,
So again, if we have any applicants where the applicant is actually a corporation, because we do differentiate between an individual applicant and a corporate applicant. If it is a corporate applicant, they're going to have corporate insurance. And that means that a commercial liability of $5 million would be appropriate for that segment.
okay, I'm gonna go to Sean and then Anita.
I think I was originally the one that brought up the $5 million liability. I think it's wise. If I was operating a short-term rental, I would want $5 million liability. $1 million doesn't go very far anymore. However, I am comfortable with $2 million if that's the desire of the committee.
Okay, Anita?
To dovetail on what Mike was saying just a little bit, what would your thoughts, Mike, be, or the committee, on tying the insurance to the occupancy? So I think I heard you say, Mike, that if it was a corporation and sort of more, you know, a business model as opposed to a family-run short-term rental, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say probably more families that have got this as, you know, a casual short-term rental thing. The cottage maybe has 2, maybe 3 bedrooms and a sunroom. Occupancy is probably sitting at 6, maybe 8, but we do have some cottages in our lakeshore area that I guess would probably argue that their occupancy is greater than 12 or 15 or 16. And if we tied the liability issue of insurance to a number of occupants, would that in any way, shape, or form help to define occupancy a little better as well? I'm thinking
Yeah,
out loud here.
I'm gonna go to Mark and then we'll think some more.
I wonder, this is another thing that are we overthinking this? Because this isn't anything that the municipality is going to be affected by. It's going to be their business. And like Sean said earlier, if I was going to be a short-term rental owner, I'd want to make sure I have 5 million, but he'd be content with 2 million. So I wonder if we're overthinking this. It should be those folks that are renting should be worried whether they have enough insurance, not us. I think as long as they provide that they do have insurance, whether it's 2 million or 5 million, is that not good enough for our purposes here?
Yeah, I'm gonna tend to agree with you, Mark, because that's what I was thinking. I think 2 million is pretty standard. If we say 5 million, even if it costs $5 more, people be like, what? And the St. Joseph's Kingsbridge Community Rental is a corporate, and we look at it every year and we talk to our insurance broker and say, is that appropriate? So I think what's appropriate is a conversation for the individual and their insurance broker, not necessarily for the municipality. And I think if we go with the standard 2 million, then that's a reasonable amount. And if your broker thinks you should have more, then you should get more. Mary?
I agree. I think that once again, I think this has to be palatable for people.
Mhm.
And I think the greatest, the majority of folks that do short-term rental are family owned. And in Huron County, we don't have, like you have 2 months of prime time. And so, to insure for $5 million for nobody using it for 10 months, um, yeah, I just think that we really want this to be palatable for folks if we're going to do it. So
Okay, so can I see by a show of hands that we agree on 2 million then? Everyone who's in agreement with that?
1, 2,
Okay,
it's everyone. Okay,
that's everyone.
thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next item. What cannot be a short-term rental? You want to flesh that out a little bit there, Lawrence? What are we talking about here?
My apologies. So there was a couple of attached is a bit of a list of prohibitions about what a person what they can operate as a short-term rental or how they cannot, and what is not allowed to be. So we did talk a little bit about that in the definitions. I know that there was also a mention by Ian, who's not here today, suggesting that there may be some exemptions for family or whatnot, where where you wouldn't define it as a rental necessarily. Having had a chance to think about that, I think that I don't know that it's appropriate to do that, because the impact of the rental to the community, to the neighborhood, would still be the same whether or not the proprietor is receiving payment for it. So that was my thoughts, and I maybe I'll just leave that there.
So Florence, are you talking about, someone loaning their cottage to a friend or,
Ian had mentioned something, that one thing he wanted to talk about was, and maybe this is something we have to wait for Ian for. He wanted to talk about, where does this not apply? Where do the licensing fees not apply?
Okay, well then I would suggest that if it was Ian who brought it up, that we can table this one until Ian comes back. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next one. Minimum distance between short-term rentals. Florence?
This was a piece in the parking lot that we had put aside. There was some municipalities who had literally put a physical distance between properties of who they could, Kelly, there was an example, was it the Township of Tiny, that had 300 meters or something between? And when we took GIS and we put it on Amberley, and at Amberley, there would be like 3. So, and Amberley has a lot, like Amberley has over 100 cottages just on the lakeshore itself. So Mark can chime in here.
Yep, Mark, go ahead.
So, yeah, I struggle why we need to worry about this, because if 98% of the people are abiding by the rules, we don't need to worry about it. And let's say Mary owns her cottage, and I thought, I'm going to buy an investment property, and I buy the one right next to her. Well, now I can't open a short-term rental because Mary's already got one running. I'm thinking, well, that's kind of unfair to me. And it's just like opening up my own pizza parlor. Like, if there's one in town, I'd like to maybe open another pizza parlor. And I don't want to be regulated because there's already a pizza parlor. I want to open my own. I don't know. I just wonder whether, like, if you think about it, if there's 3 rented side by side, they're all not going to come together and create a great big party. They're going to do their own separate things because none of them know each other. But I wonder if we're just thinking about this too much again.
Sean?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should be cautious, and I think that we need to kind of balance the enforcement benefit with the lost revenue that would contribute to making it cost neutral. So I think it may be something that needs to be looked at in the future if you find that there's whole neighborhoods that are becoming short-term rentals, but I think that we should be cautious right now.
I think I'd agree with that. The only other comment I'd like to make is it's been mentioned a couple times that 98 or 99% of them are owned by families and they have no problem. And I would like to point out that Mark Twain said that 98% of his statistics are made up, including that one. We don't know that 98% are owned by families and don't have problems. It's a fun statistic, but I think maybe we should stop repeating it because it's becoming
I'm
fun.
bad. So
Well, you weren't the first one to say it or the second, so I think I just want to say we don't know, and that's why we're doing this. Mike.
And again, I refer back to the council meeting at Central Elgin, because I think the discussion about caps and limits was of particular concern to the Port Stanley group, where they had whole cottage communities that the complexion of those communities was dramatically altered because it was, one STR beside the other. But again, we are a long way from that, but it is simply something to be mindful of as far as going forward, that if all of a sudden there is a proliferation of STRs in any one particular beach association, we may have to revisit that. But I don't think this is the time to do it.
I like that, and I'm wondering if when it's not in our terms of reference yet, I'm pretty sure that, I think we should meet in a year, or somebody should meet and say, was this right? What did we miss? What didn't we miss? And maybe that also includes a recommendation of a periodic review every 3 years or something of let's see what's happening here. I don't think it needs to be yearly, certainly in the beginning, but then after that, if it's not scheduled, it probably isn't going to happen. And I think that should be in our terms of reference or whatever the correct phrase is there.
Well, certainly we'll have a much better opportunity to track the geographic locations of where the STRs are located, because we're licensing all of them.
That's right. And we don't even know what we're talking about now, since we don't know who's licensed and who's not or where they are. This will give us that opportunity. So is everyone in agreement that we will parking lot that minimum distance? We're going to leave that? Show of hands, please. Okay. All right, then. For those of you who can't see, Sean's very scared now, lifting his hand fast. I love it. Okay, exemptions from licensing, that's the one we're gonna table, fees and fines.
Okay. Just to recap here, what cannot be a short-term rental, that was literally the document that was attached, and that was kind of a very, for lack of a better word, administrative list.
Mhm.
And seeing no comment on that, we'll put that into the draft as is, and then we'll look at it as a whole once that comes back.
Okay,
But for the exemptions from licensing, that would be the one that Ian would like to have a chat about.
okay.
And fees and fines. I think this is the one that everyone's been waiting for.
Okay, well, it's here now.
Before we move on, I've had my
Oh.
hand up.
Yep, so sorry. My staff is letting me down here. And Mike, is your hand up or just your little thing? It is up. Okay, we're gonna go to Anita and then Mike.
Jennifer, you said on the minimum distance that we're going to put that in the parking lot. And when you say we're putting it in the parking lot, I always assumed the parking lot was something that we're going to come back to revisit. The discussion I gathered, what I comprehended from that discussion was we're not going to regulate any minimum distance requirements at this point. So is that is that what we're agreeing on? No minimum distance at this
yeah,
time? Or are we
yeah.
putting it in the parking lot to talk about it later? Because you said parking lot.
Yeah, so my intention of that is, let's say we do a strategic plan and you have your action plan, your implementation plan. In the back, you still have what to me is the parking lot, but you're not gonna do it now, but let's not forget about it and let's look at it again. So whether that's the improper use of parking lot, but the same intent, but certainly not now. But yeah, Anita, you're not Anita. You're Florence. Go ahead, Florence.
It's long-term parking.
Yeah, long-term parking, I guess. We're park and fly. So my direction is that the minimum distance will not be considered as part of this draft going to council.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, just going back to Florence's earlier comments from a couple of minutes ago. Were you referring, Florence, to the prohibitions document? That ultimately is also going to be incorporated into the bylaw, or that's just a reference document?
That's the wording that would be suggested to go into the bylaw.
Okay, so I think this is the first time we've seen that, is it not?
Correct.
Okay, I think it's a great document. I just had one question.
Sure.
2A. Is that what we mean to say? Any structure other than a habitable room, or do we mean habitable dwelling?
I'm just looking at, I think we don't, I think it should be dwelling, not habitable room, any structure other than a dwelling.
I would
Okay.
agree with that as well.
Because we define habitable room, but a dwelling has habitable room inside of the definition. So dwelling.
Okay.
I knew I could count on you, Mike.
Good catch.
Otherwise, I think it's great.
Where are we now? Fees and fines, correct? Do we have, is there a document with that?
No.
Oh, okay, because I couldn't find it. So how do we start a discussion about fees and fines? Yep, Mark.
There is a report there, Jennifer, under 4.4. Just open up 4.4, and then there's the graph. There's the chart underneath showing you what everybody else's is.
Oh, I thought, yeah, no, I thought there was something more. I did see that. I thought a more,
And
Fulton
it's
fine.
difficult to know how to charge it because we don't know what our expense is going to be. But I guess we'll find out after the first year.
yeah,
So the reason why I guess staff didn't provide much more than what the comparators are for the initial licensing fee is because we don't have a good sense of how much it actually would cost to actually recoup the cost. So I feel like the committee needs to the committee needs to be satisfied with the bylaw and the content of the bylaw. And then we give it a try for a year. And then after a year, we see where the revenue expense falls and then do a review from there. So kind of give a median amount, like you've got everything, anywhere from like a Georgian Bay Light has a $250 licensing fee, anywhere to Romera, which has a $3,000. Romera is much more heavy on their enforcement. Like they've got permitting systems and whatnot. Like they do a lot of the inspections themselves, that kind of thing. When we sat down, Mark and I sat down a little bit and kind of thought about, when we start this licensing program, how much actual work and how are we going to sit down and decide who's responsible for it and how much work it's going to take, getting those licensing, the advertising, pulling it out. I really don't think that it's going to be, I'm gonna eat my words. I don't think it's going to be a massive administrative job, especially once everybody's into it.
Mhm.
And then once we have that, then we'll know, we start tracking time on attention, appeals, bylaw enforcement. If it's specific to a short-term rental license, then we can start tracking those things. I just don't see that we can say, based on this program, it's going to be a for sure $450, and it'll be revenue neutral in its first year. And yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. No, wait, I was gonna let Mark go first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
Yep.
So I agree with Florence, and I think it's going to be very difficult to track. And my idea was that whoever the staff member is that's taking these applications, they're going to clock their time somehow. We'd figure that out in-house. And the only other expenses I think that we would have is if we talked to the bylaw enforcement officer too, that, because most of the times, a lot of these infractions are the reason why we have short-term rentals is because of the complaints we get, and they're usually bylaw enforcement related. And we sit down with the bylaw enforcement officer and have to track these costs too. So, and again, it's going to be very difficult within the first year, but tracking it basically is just staff's time, whether it's the bylaw enforcement officer or staff in-house. And I can't think of any expenses other than that. But I guess after a year, we'll know better. And if there is a deficit, so be it. And the municipality absorb it, and we'll carry on the next year and see whatever it is. Maybe we might charge too much and we'll have a surplus, but we'll know better after a year.
Glenn and then Mary?
Okay, thank you. I had two questions. One is to staff. Do you have a ballpark of a recommendation for us for consideration?
No.
So my second comment is just for discussion. What about $500? The average of these is about $850 with my math. What if we started at $500? What is everyone's thoughts on that?
Okay, I'm gonna hold that thought for a minute. We'll get people's comments, and then, so we have everybody's thoughts, and then we'll start the negotiations. All right, Mary?
Just a thought, and I don't know if this is a good one, but Lambton County, they did their first year, it was mandatory that all VRBO, or not VRBOs, but short-term rentals register, but they were free to get people to buy into. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I think that's something to be considered as well. But the township would then have to bite it, right? Like that's, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
Go ahead, Florence.
to the point is, I can see how that would work, because then we could kind of get an idea how much it would actually cost and how many rentals we actually have. We already eat the expenses to deal with the consequences of short-term rentals without any kind of, if this was in place, if there's an issue, you're going to have hopefully an appeal fee, some charges or fees to cover the cost of dealing with things that we don't have any revenue to deal with right now as it is. I don't like at first, when we were first looking at this, the idea of the first year free was, oh God, like no. But the more we're looking into the draft as it's coming along, as we've gone through each piece, is very much owner centric. The responsibility is on the owner, and there should be little interference from the municipality. The cost of it is the administration to make sure that the checks and balances are in place. And then any bylaw enforcement office that needs to happen as a result of that. So I don't because I was imagining at first, we'd have to do fire inspections, and we have to do all these inspections, and to make everybody compliant, and every single one we'd have to go and inspect to double check that they have all the things that they need. And that's not what this is turned into. So I also don't see that the expenses are going to be as significant as necessarily some other municipalities. So I'm not, ultimately it would be up to council, but they will strongly take into consideration the recommendation of the committee that if you do choose to do maybe a first year half price, I don't know, or free for the first year, just to get the onboarding in place, that council's in support of that. This is a good thing to get everybody going, and then the next year, go from there. Anyway,
Okay, do any of my screen friends have comments? Mike or Anita? Anita?
I understand where the, not charging a fee for the first year. I don't disagree with a lot of the points that you make. The one that concerns me, though, is that if you make it free for the first year and then we find out that the expenses are greater than what, administration had counted on, and now we have to go from 0 to 500, there's going to be a lot of complaints about that. I understand $500 as an opening fee, but I wonder, everybody loves a sale. And I wonder if council or if the committee would suggest to council a $500 fee, but for the first year, it will be half price. Everybody loves a half off, 50% off price sale. And would that be something enough to entice people to sign up and register and not do anything sort of under the table? It worries me that if we're free for the first year, we start charging the second year, there's more opportunity for people to do this sort of under the table, hoping not to get caught.
Okay, Mike, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't believe even the first year that there should be no cost. I think the STR owner should have some financial commitment in the process. I also can't tell you what I think the sweet spot is as far as a licensing fee. I would be concerned if it is set what the casual STR renter feels is, exorbitant, that they're just going to ignore the licensing process and hope they don't get caught. And then we're still faced with potentially the cost of bylaw enforcement. And obviously there would be fines that we would have in place, but which would be a discouraging or something that would discourage an STR applicant from trying to avoid licensing. But Glenn, I think back to your point, I think 500 is too much for an opening, year one, especially when we don't know how many STR license applications we're going to have. It is difficult to say what future years are going to be, because we may find that it does need to be 500 or 750, depending on what our costs are going to be. But definitely feel strongly that it should not be zero.
Okay, so now we have two more people that comment, and then we'll go back to you, Glenn. Sean, and then me. Yeah, that's you.
Microphone.
Sorry, I was snoozing again. I think this is a really tough subject to get into and to establish a fee without having idea of the numbers of short-term rentals that are out operating and the proportional staff time that would be spent on each file. I agree. I think $500 is a little steep without any data to back that up. And I think that if the danger in that and going in too high is that you could create more work for enforcement to identify and weed out and find these folks that are still operating without a license, and that could disproportionately inflate the cost for the folks that are doing it the proper way. So I don't know, it's a tough one without the data to know what we're dealing with and to know, what the actual cost of running the program is going to be. So it's a tough conversation, and I'm not sure we're going to get through it tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to recap and then I'll tell you what I heard, whether it was correct or not. Tough number. We don't know what to do because we don't have any data. Having said that, we have to do something. So we have to come up with a number. It's just going to be our best guess. The danger in starting too high is that we create an underground black market where we're just going to hope not to get caught. We want buy-in. And as soon as we get the buy-in, we will get data, which will drive the price, and also some of the questions that are in the park and fly lot. How do we do with this long-term? So does everyone agree that's what we've said? Because that's what I'm basing my comments on. So I think 500 might be the number we land on eventually, but it's absolutely too high to start with. The most important thing to me is that we get the buy-in, which means the number has to be low. I'm not adverse to zero, but I do hear people adverse to zero. And I absolutely agree. Everybody loves a sale. I'll buy anything on sale. So if we think the number might be $500, then I would do half off, $250. If we think 400 might be closer, I would start with 200. But when we start with that number, we would advertise it first year only, 50% off. Fees will be going to this number next year. And then we review it. And then if, let's say there's all these parties, birthdays, 30 years, I don't know. But we find let's use 500, it's an easier number. Let's say the 500, which we thought was going to be okay. We start with 250, we say next year it's going to be 500. And then in the first year, it's obvious that 500 is the wrong number. It's still 500 that second year. But that's when we say, listen, based on this, it's going up next year. If you haven't done it yet, now you have to do it. I think if you want buy-in and this is a brand new program, you have to go low. And it's not going to be revenue neutral. The cemeteries aren't revenue neutral and they're supposed to be. The garbage is not revenue neutral, but it's something you aim for down the road. And startup costs are always more. And those are my comments. And now we'll go back to you, Mr. McNeil.
Okay, thank you. Well, I achieved the desired effect by putting out that number to get good discussion. And that was the purpose. I think we all agree no fee is not appropriate. There needs to be some ownership. So
Well, I'm gonna stop you because we don't all agree to that. Two of us here don't for sure, but so let's say we're gonna come up with something we can all live with. Okay.
So in that light, if we set it at $100, it provides buy-in without a doubt, and it's something. And no one would say no for $100 on rentals to go underground. It's a starting point for consideration.
Okay, Mark, and then we're gonna go around. Everyone's gonna have to say something. We'll start with Mike after Mark.
So I just gonna talk about what you had said, Jennifer, about telling everyone there's going to be 500 next year. I'm a little hesitant on that because we don't know what that number is. And if we tell everybody it's 50% off at 250, we really don't know what that number is until we have a year under our belt. So I think the committee needs to decide on what an appropriate number to buy in and just leave it at that. And don't call it a sale and don't say it's going to be double next year because we don't know. And there's no sense trying to report the news until it happens. So.
Mike?
I guess going back to an earlier comment that a lot of the township staff work is going to be the administrative review of these applications and then the issuance of the licensing. So if we take a straightforward, family cottage that's rented out for half the summer, they fill in all the blanks, they dot all the I's, cross all the T's, what's the staff work involved as far as reviewing that? I think whoever the staff member is that is tasked with that responsibility knows what the expectations are. And they say, I need to see a parking lot plan. I don't see that. Have to go back to the applicant, request that information. So there's likely going to be a little bit of back and forth. So what's the time commitment for the review and processing of each application? Are we talking an hour? Just throwing that out. But and including, let's say, the issuance of that piece of paper that says you are now a licensed STR owner. So, give me the benefit of the doubt. Let's say it's an hour. What's an hour of staff time worth?
Florence?
So two comments. The first one is in terms of staff time, just throwing it out there. I deal with the cemetery. That's something that's a little bit, it can be time consuming on sometimes based on the families that you deal with and the issues that come up. And every time there's a transaction, it takes approximately a half an hour to deal with a cemetery transaction. That's a half an hour of my time, just the face value. And then there's a half an hour of time afterwards to deal with the paperwork to settle it, like, to file it away, to log it, to put the records in, all of that, to charge the payment, all of that takes, so the whole thing takes about an hour of an interaction. And that's when everything goes smoothly. you know, and then, but if it doesn't go smoothly, then you have to add on either another half an hour to deal with it, sometimes another couple hours. So I would say, like, conservatively, you're looking at about all said and done, I think you're probably looking at about 2 hours an application. From the time, see, even if they had a perfect application, it comes in, the parking plan looks great, they've got the certificate of insurance, everything looks great, that'll be half an hour to 45 minutes of the review. And then you have to issue the actual document, there's an hour. But if they're missing a piece of it, that pile goes on hold and sits on the corner of your desk until they come back, right? So it's also that waiting time. So I think that it's worth stating that if you had, if I recall, when we first started this, we did ask the companies of what it would cost to have a hotline or whatnot. And one of the companies generously told us that we had approximately 75 listed short-term rentals in the township as of, I think it was in December. There were 75 of them. So, or I pulled up the number 78. If $100 for 78 properties is $7,800. So, there's a small part-time gig for that. As staff member, $100 is not enough. I would say to start, you would want to at least do 200 to start. That way, the $200 it's almost like it's the application's fee. It's not necessarily license, but an application. If you think of the time it would take to process an application, $200 would sit in that 2-hour mark. Like, in terms of, like, if you had 2 people working on it, or the time, and you've got some other processing thing, there's some admin costs kind of buried into it. The 2 hours to deal with an application would be $200.
Anita, before, sorry,
Yes.
Kelly, never mind. Kelly had her hand up. That was Mary.
I know there has been discussion about using one of those companies to source the STRs, so I don't know if that's a decision you want to proceed with, and you'd have to consider that expense as well, which is at like $5,000.
So, to that end, no, it's not. Now it is. I think staff could try to do this without that. I mean, if we're finding that we're getting a lot of complaints, and again, this is all complaint driven too. People know who's not paying the fee. People know who's not advertising, or who's not, they will look up. Again, I think there will be a bit of a learning curve around this too. And I think, again, in the park and fly, lot, we can have a look at, would it be worth having an outside source do it? Anyway, I think if it was just staff's time to get this set up and to get buy-in in the first year, I think it's doable for a less than $500 fee.
Okay, thank you. Anita?
So I'm gonna sit at $250 based on what Florence is saying, that it has to start at $200. And then she's saying there's 78 estimated rentals right now. And if you charge the extra $50 from the 200 to 250, and they all buy in, that's an extra $4,000. And I think it was about a $5,000 bill to have one of those companies do that for you. So if, say, at $200 that Florence has suggested, we're sort of revenue neutral based on staff time, the extra $50 per rental is $4,000. That goes a long way to getting us started with a company, if in a year that's where staff recommends that we should go. It's there's money in the bank then.
Okay, Mary?
I'm probably would support the first year free. And I think one of the reasons, and I realize it's going to cost some money, but if you're going to get people to buy something, or to get a license and put money down, they don't know what they're getting, right? And so, whether it's half price or full price, but for forever, people have not had to have a license. And so what benefit is there for them to have a license? And so why should they register? And how are we gonna get them to register? I'm not sure. But somehow you gotta get people, there has to be some benefits. And, and you talked about an open house and, the lovely posters and like, I think there's some community building that could happen around, this is a good thing to do, right? And I think I don't know if people really want to pay for it. And I could see, people not paying, not letting people know, and then who goes out and polices that, so
Okay.
that's my thought.
Thank you. Sean?
I like Anita's suggestion of 250. I like the thought that the clerk put into the 200 number. I think that a small percentage of these short-term rentals have some additional enforcement costs that will be incurred to investigate and enforce different issues there. And I think that by putting in that extra $50 to 250 kind of hedges the bet a little bit in favor of the municipality in the first year. So I would support that.
Okay, I'm going to say what I'm going to support, and then I'm going to suggest we table it until the next meeting and give the comments some thought. And I'll certainly think on mine some more. While I appreciate all the comments, and I do, I think if the clerk is saying that $200 is probably revenue neutral, I'm hesitant to charge more so that we have money in the bank. I mean, we're trying to get it to be revenue neutral. If 200 is a revenue neutral number, barring big surprises, then that's probably as high as I would like to go. I also like Mary's talk about, we have to figure out how we're going to sell it. Like, what are you getting for this $200 if that's what we end up with? What are the benefits for you? Because you're not one of the problem ones, right? Or you're not the neighbor next to the problem one. So we have to, I think, look at that piece a little more. And I had another thought, but maybe when we bring it back up, it'll come. Mike has his hand up. Okay. Oh, I remembered my thought. Thanks for that. And then I'll go to Mike. No, it's gone again. Sorry. Mike.
Yeah, I guess I didn't get a chance to throw out a number other than I was not a supporter of a zero starting point. I'm also don't believe we should tease the constituents with saying, well, one time only deal, 50% off, or we don't know what the price is going to be next year, or it's going to be $500 next year. And I guess I look at what I'm being charged by various contractors and trades and things like that as far as an hourly rate, and listening to what Florence was saying as far as the staff time that's involved. And for me, I guess other than accountants and lawyers, I mean, $150 per hour is probably not an unusual rate. And there's also, I think, again, if you want to say a psychological reason for somebody looking at $200, that's a lot of money. Maybe it's $175. Is that and I would support $175 as a starting point.
Okay, and then we'll go to Mark.
So I think Florence is referring just to the administration end of it, I think, for clarification, and she's shaking her head yes. So that doesn't include anything for bylaw enforcement officer either. So we have to be mindful that if there are complaints of the bylaw enforcement officers running around doing this, that's over and above the 200. Is that correct, Florence?
Yes, bearing in mind that there would also be fines for contravention prepared. So not having a license, advertising a short-term rental without having a license, being over occupancy, noise. So these are the fines that would be issued or that would be drafted that would be enforceable under the licensing bylaw versus, the noise bylaw itself or whatnot. So there would be revenue on that part, but only if it got to that point. So for the most part, when the bylaw enforcement officer goes out for the first time on a call, like we're not going to have dollars in the bank to pay for that you know, just from the admin costs, so to speak.
Okay, Mark, do you want to make a comment before we put it to bed?
I agree with what Jennifer and Mary said to you. You gotta tell the folks out there, why is it a benefit to sign up? Because no one's going to sign up because you're going to say, no, I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing until I get caught. So there has to be some kind of incentive to sign. I don't know what that is, and I think it's something that we can table tonight and think about it and come back. How are we going to sell this? So.
Somebody's mic must be muted.
Yep, that's mine. We're moving on to item 4.5. Thanks, Anita. We've got 20 minutes left. The meeting will be ending at 8:30. I'm clearly not getting any smarter. Kelly put on a report here. Who would like to make the first comment? That would be Sean.
I wrote lots of notes on this one. So
Oh,
bear
good.
bear with me. Sometimes I have a hard time reading my own handwriting. The public consultation, I think we should be cautious. I think that there's a lot of potential for pressure for exemptions without understanding the full financial impacts. We haven't decided on a fee, so when we get to that public consultation, we should before we get there, we should have some consensus of what those fees are going to look like, and we should be confident in that. Any changes that come out of that should be weighed against the financial model. There's no link between consultation and cost. It could include summary of cost neutral goals. So I wonder if we can advertise that or promote that the aim is to reach that cost neutral. And then there was no mention of a direct outreach to known STR operators. And those are the folks that are going to be most affected. So those are the people that we really want to hear from during that public consultation. So I think that's something we should consider. Also, I wonder about if we can include a prioritized survey format so that they could prioritize with the licensing goals, whether low fees, rule enforcement, ease of process, limit negative impact to the neighbors, protect township from liability. They can weight some different options against each other so that we can get a consensus of what's the most important items for the individuals that are there. You could have one if you had to choose one: low fees, limited enforcement, high fees to affect or to support active enforcement. We could even ask, there was some talk about a short term or the 21-day. Should there be consideration for that, and should it be less of a fee? We could even ask that during that. I did have insurance down, but I think we solved that tonight. I also wondered if we should be asking what concerns do they have, whether they're an STR or a neighbor of an STR. And then we could use it as an opportunity to look for suggestions from those that we're consulting, obviously.
Oh, you woke up just in time. Good job. Does anyone else have any comments? Mary?
A couple of them. I like the idea of a drop-in format for the open house. It's probably less sort of less finger pointing and more friendly. I think that if people really need to know when this is going to start, because this summer people book for next summer. Right. And so they need to know what they're going to get into. And so I think it probably would be helpful maybe around early September is to have that open house, and because people are still around. But a real clear statement of when it's going to start. I don't know. the other thing, and this is maybe not quite related to the committee report, but I've been thinking about, I've been talking to people who have rentals, and this year is a really slow year. People are not renting. We've had we list on cottages in Canada, and we've been doing it for years, and we've had not a whole lot of new people looking at it. And I've talked to other people, and their rentals are really down. And so, this is an economic driver in the community, and it supports businesses and, in Godrich and all over the place. So I think that's important to know too, is if rentals are down, people are not going to be that, I think they want some support, to be able, if they're going to run a business, they want some support from the municipality to help them run a business, right? And not be sort of looked at as a punitive thing. And I think a lot of this came up during COVID, when the traffic for across, any short-term rental was huge, because people had they couldn't go anywhere, but they could go to a cottage, right? And so, but it's dropped. And so I think I just wanted to throw that out as a consideration for people. Like, that's certainly our experience and other people's experience as well. So FYI, thanks.
Thank you. Great comments. Anything from the friends on faces on the wall over there? Mike, and then Anita.
I certainly found that the strategy was excellent, because it does try to get the messaging out in a variety of ways. The primary concern that I have is to be able to have this process happen in September, considering unless we start doubling up on meetings, we only have 2 other committee meetings before September. And I think there's still a fair number of items that have to be resolved, and a fair bit of material that has to be put together and be ready for presentation once we announce the draft bylaw and start posting everything online. September would be an ideal time. I'm just not sure that we can pull it off and get it out by September. What we lose by not doing it in September is people start shutting things down. A number of the beach associations have their year-end meeting, usually the Labor Day weekend. So it's unlikely that we're going to have any information on the STR bylaw in their hands before they have their September meetings. So we miss an opportunity there for the beach associations to have dialogue amongst themselves. And then once we get into October, November, then we run the risk of people not being as engaged as they would be during the summer months. So I'm not sure I don't have an answer on that one, unless you can really fast track and get it ready for September. With
I'll
2
ask
meetings
the
left,
clerk
I think
about
that's
that. Yeah.
Let's ask Anita first.
Okay, Anita, and then we'll have the clerk make the comment on the timing.
I agree with Mary and Mike that I think it's crucial that we have the consultation happen in September. What Mike said about the beach associations usually have their year-end meetings on the Labor Day weekend. I think it would be prudent at this point for our municipality to reach out to the beach associations to let them know that there will be, consultation coming in September, so that they can have that on their agendas for their year-end meetings if it happens, around the Labor Day weekend. One thing that Mary had said that I think is important, she said that rentals are down, and we have to keep that in mind, possibly when it comes to fees, but also to keep in mind with the consultation process. But on the other side of that is that if the fees are really high in other areas, and I'll just say Tiny Township or Collingwood or Central Elgin, if those fees are really high, then the places where the fees are really low, maybe that's where people are going to start to flock to. So that's the other side of the coin to that. but it's all sort of very potential and very vague at this point. But I think it's important to have the drop-in format. And I think it's important too to make certain that if you're looking for committee members to be there at a drop-in format, that it's not an attack on people. You know, I wouldn't want people to be there, committee members to be there and feel as though, you know, they're being hung out to dry and attacked in any way.
Okay, Florence, speaking to the timing.
So, the last month I've had a chance to, with all of the pieces that we've settled on, I've been able to pull together a draft of the bylaw. There's just, we haven't brought it forward quite yet because there's some administrative pieces that haven't been put in, and we just wanted to get a couple more things cleaned up before you bring a draft. If the committee's prepared, we can bring a draft to the next meeting. That would be a full draft with all of the admin pieces that the committee doesn't necessarily need to make a decision on. It's just, those are the things that make it a bylaw. And licensing fees and appeal fees, and also the schedule for contraventions, those are pieces that can be put, those don't have to come to the next meeting. Those pieces are part of, you know, a consolidated fee bylaw. They're attached to the bylaw, so they don't have to be part and parcel. Obviously, this is going to be a consideration for the committee to have the fee, but the context of the bylaw itself and what the rules are, that isn't going to, you know, you're not going to say, oh, I want the fee to be $200 less, so let's take this part of the bylaw out. No, that's not how that works, right? So I think the nuts and bolts of what the committee wants as a part of the bylaw is done, as far as I'm concerned. There's not a whole lot of questions. Most of the things have been taken out of the short-term parking lot and have been dealt with. So I think for the July meeting, we could definitely bring that back. A few of the other little pieces of conversation we can go in, and then I think by the end of the next meeting, we would have a better idea of whether or not September's attainable. Two sides to the coin. You know, you want to take your time to make sure that this is done right and that we've reviewed everything, and that, you know, you can go to the open house feeling confident in the conversation, knowing that, you know, no matter what somebody throws at you, you can defend it. Also, any plan that you present to the public, you know, as long as there's public consultation, the plan is defensible. You want to have that for sure. But if you delay it too long, then we're running into another season. And I think that is I don't think it's necessary to drag it out. So we can try our best to try to have something as much kind of finalized at the end of the next meeting. If the committee feels that they really want to work for a September deadline, then, you know, we can maybe schedule another meeting in here. I know it's summertime, but again, we have to kind of balance what the interest is of what the committee's mandated to do. So.
Yep, Mike.
And again, just referring back to my earlier comments, I certainly would support a September, you know, consult period. But I also looked at the calendar, and this is one of these goofy years where Labor Day actually happens on September 1st. So that means, so working backwards, if you want information to be available to the various beats associations, chances are they're meeting on August 30th or 31st, which means the package of information should be out in advance of those meetings, which would make it the Monday, August the 25th. So if we have two more meetings, you know, to come up with a presentable package, that would be our July meeting, and then having an August meeting earlier than normally scheduled on August the 19th. That allows for the launch on the 25th, the long weekend discussion by the various groups. You open up your commenting, whether it's online or you know, the commentary, whatever other social media vehicles you will be using. That can happen between September 1 to September 26. And then you throw in a couple of the open houses on September 13th, September 20th. And then when we get to our October meeting, we can kind of consolidate what the input has been. And then we might actually have something to meet council's deadline as far as, here's where we stand as far as this bylaw for their November consideration. Oh, one other thing, and I think this was mentioned somewhere before, as far as having a drafted frequently asked questions document as well. And I was going to mention this later, that perhaps that's something that could be on our agenda for our next meeting if we can come up with a laundry list of questions and have those ready for publication or distribution when the package goes out. Thank you.
That was an impressively lot of words about scheduling. I am going to defer to the clerk on this, but I'm less concerned about that timeline of August 25th than I am about getting it right. I think even if we had a draft or we said to them, bring it to your meetings, we have a date and the information will follow, right? I don't think we have to have all the ducks ready first to schedule that. But again, maybe we can talk about that at the next meeting, Florence.
Two comments. The first is ideally the draft would first go to council and then the public consultation piece would go forward because council needs to see the document and say, yep, this is great. Bring it to the public, see what they think. Is that kind of, am I picking that up right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's first. So August 12th is your August council meeting and then September 2nd. So that's, there's only one in August. So there's that kind of throws a little bit of a loop in it there. And the second piece was gone.
Mark has the second piece.
Yeah, I think it has to go to council before we have any open houses, but I think communication to the group and we don't have access to all the cottage associations. We don't know who they all are. I mean, we might know who they are, but we don't know who the contacts are. We have the ACLA, Ashfield-Colborne-Lakefront Association, who I'm sure has contacts for all of them. So they would be our contact. And we could set something out if we don't have everything all in line for their meetings. We could say, hey, council's working on this, the township's working on this, so stay tuned. There'll be more information to follow, and that'll the radars of those folks will be interested in, and they're going to follow our website or social media to see what the outcome is and whatever strategic communications that we go ahead with. So I think that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mark. So you're okay leaving it?
Yeah, I think we've got enough for now, I think. The only thing I was going to mention was that, as long as we have the word out that something is coming, that there is a draft bylaw and that we're able to get the information out to those potential renters or to the potential licensees, even if the bylaw is passed and there's uptake, we can even host something in the spring before the season starts. I know we'll have had, but I feel like the more we do in educating and getting the word out there, the better it's going to go over no matter what. I think I'm just about done for the day. Sorry. To that end, what I was going to suggest was that we would bring back a draft of the bylaw complete, with some of the outstanding issues, and then also a draft schedule of fines for contravention as well. So that would be just kind of segueing and moving through this.
Yeah, okay. Anita.
I guess because we're getting close to the end of the time limit that you've set, Jennifer, what I would like to see at the next meeting is for this committee to approve a draft that will be recommended to council. And that's sort of the goal that I would like to see for the next meeting. I wonder if through you to the chair, if that sounds reasonable and with the clerk and the CAO's consultation on that.
Florence?
I think we could work towards that. I'm not sure that the whole piece would be pulled together. That is because the education component is also there as well for council to consider. I mean, the meat of the bylaw is the most important piece. And if that was brought forward, and we could even bring it forward in a couple of stages, you know, the mandate of the committee is not supposed to be done until the end of October. So there's still some time to do some of the work around it. But if I'm prepared to have a draft for the committee to review for the 24th is it the 24th of July? No. Oh, that was another piece I wanted to talk about. So-
Continue.
Yes. So it would be the meeting in July that we would have this draft. And I guess we'll talk about the next meeting at the next next point.
Okay,
Madam
so,
Chair, if I could just clarify, I did mean when Florence did say earlier the nuts and bolts of a draft. So that's what I was, just to clarify, that's what I was referring to.
okay,
As
perfect.
a draft of nuts and bolts, a nuts and bolts draft to go to council for recommendation for approval.
Sounds good. Mary?
Just a question, and I'm sure you've thought about this, is getting information out to people that aren't associated with the beach association, or, you know, the cabins on the Maitland River and, you know, all over the place. And so people, you know, and I'm figuring out a strategy about how to communicate to everyone.
Yep, Kelly?
Our plan is to include a blurb in the tax newsletter that goes out to all the tax ratepayers.
Mark?
Yeah, the only problem I have with the tax newsletter is that, and it's a great idea, but it has to be done, like the tax bills go out in the middle of August. So and then they take time to create and print and all that. So it'd have to be early August. So, but I guess we could put a blurb in there saying, stay tuned, this is happening.
Okay, any more comments on that? Any new business to be brought to a future meeting? Because we don't have enough at the next meeting. No, all right, then let's talk about the next meeting. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not really that smart at 8:30 at night. We did move it to 4:30 a couple times, or 4, whatever time it was. But Evan prefers them at 7 because it's easier for him to make. Since he doesn't have a vote here, I'd like to move it back, and then the meetings could go a little longer and I might be a little smarter. And so might the clerk be. How does that sound to you?
I would agree on that one.
What times did we do last
Sorry,
time?
I'm just going to articulate. So July has 5 Tuesdays,
Oh, okay.
and the 4th Tuesday is the 22nd, but there's also the 29th in there as well. So on the list of approved days, Mark, we had a conversation about this. Is this coming to?
Yeah, I have in my calendar, it was going to be July 29th.
So
Well, while we're thinking about the date, is everybody okay moving it back to 4:30 for time?
yes.
Show of hands. Mary's went way up. Okay. Let's move it back to 4:30 then.
The original schedule, when everyone signed up for this committee, original schedule does say July 29th.
29th.
And it's in my calendar as July 29th. I won't be here that meeting, but I wish you well.
So based on, I just have this question, based on the fact that we're trying to have some quick turnaround for the August newsletter, is July 29th too late?
If it does work for the committee, I would prefer the 22nd. I know you, I'm sorry, Mark.
I'm still not here either. So
I know. So I would prefer the 22nd because that does give a little bit. No, I'm lying. The 29th would be better.
Okay.
It is 8th. I know this day is done.
Okay, comment to whoever that guy is.
So I think if you head to July 29th, stick to our schedule. I think whatever blurb we're going to do in the newsletter will be a generic blurb anyway. It's going to say, hey, we're working on a short-term rental and stay tuned. And that's it. It doesn't matter whether we met the 22nd or 29th.
The next meeting of the short-term rental committee will be on July 29th at 4:30 PM or at the call of the chair. All right, so can I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn the meeting? Sean's awake. And Mary. Moved by Sean, seconded by Mary, that the short-term rental committee does now adjourn to meet again on July 29th at 4:30 PM or at the call of the chair. All those in favor of that motion? And the motion carried. Thank you all for your work.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.